Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you live around the world. Well, what have we got here? In a previous video, I was making mentioning of interviewing my typewriter, and I've done the same today, but I've developed a bit further the jig. I want to more concentrate on some of the how do we get there components of the process, making the center line for the hub using our scribe or our center drill or a dial indicator. If you, just to back up a little bit, I made mention that if you set a scribe tip in your drill press and move the jig backwards and forwards, you'll get to the point where it'll just snick the top of the circumference of the tube, and that'll be your center line for your drill. You can also more accurately and more visually use a dial indicator, gently put it into your chuck if the indicator is able to be chucked up, because some of them don't have much of a top tip to be inserted into the drill chuck. And then you can do the same thing where once you've got the very tip of it just about touching, you can move backwards and forwards until such time as you get a reading on the dial indicator, and where it's when you're moving it but it's not moving but it's touching, or just touching, it'll wobble backwards and forwards around your registration mark, which you've decided on, and that will also be your center line that you can use for your first hole. But be mindful not to tighten up the chuck too much, otherwise it could crush your dial indicator and you'll be most upset. Once you've got that position, and I'm just showing it actually on the very front edge of your hub, that'll be where I'll just zoom in here. This is why there was a gap here, because you would have initially, because I've already moved it, if this would be initially pushed back against the back of the base of the jig itself, you then move it forward the amount that you have decided that your first hole will be drilled. In my case, it is likely to be 50 millimeters down from the top. So by drawing the jig forward as a unit, 50 mil, we get that location. So you just have to gauge off the back block, which is rigid, 50 mil. Now you can do that in any number of ways. Probably the most logical one would be to have a piece of timber milled accurately to that dimension, or like I've got 50 by 25 box section aluminium, and that is pretty darn accurate. So you just have a section of that, pop it in, and then you know that you have moved your jig forward 50 millimeters, and that will be your first hole. In my case, it just happens to be a happy coincidence. The jig would be guided along on that base by the rails on the side, just as it is here. And that's what I was saying. I came across this jig previously, not this iteration of it, but previously, where you can guide it backwards and forwards, because I was wanting to make some other items for another project, and by using the multiple sled type jigs, you could move them independent of each other and make very accurate registration moves or marks. So this is why the jig is looking as it is now. It's actually built upon another idea that I'd had. One of my interviews of the typewriter was, well, how do you get the center hub when we haven't got a lathe, or if we haven't got a lathe. And there's a couple of ways of doing it. The easiest way is to just use your bench saw or your drop saw, but likely a bench saw, and cut a couple of squares so that they kind of just neatly push into the inner tube. And then of course you can, because they're square, you can mark the diagonals, drill a hole, and then put a bolt through, so you've got it front and back, and that locates pretty accurately your hub. So now you're supporting your hub. Just backing up the truck a wee bit, one of the things for accuracy, we wanted to make sure that this line, this horizontal line, was dead accurate for the, how would you say, the 90 degree line. This is the one, this is surface, is the one which we align our pasted on photocopy for our hub. And to get that, I saw how someone built it in another jig where they made this out of one piece, and then they cut this out, and I thought, whoa, therein lies a problem for accuracy, and there's no need to do that. Make it in two pieces, where before you drill for the actual shaft, you've got the two pieces joined together. Use the tip of the drill to locate, or use the join rather, to locate your drill, and then you proceed to make the hole, meaning that this becomes the alignment surface or point for your drill, making this automatically register as the line for our marks here. Not to do that just means I think it's more complicated than what I've just done. It is. You would, at the time of drilling this piece, do it in concert with the back piece so that the surfaces are aligned and clamped together, and one drill process does both the back and the front, making them more likely to be accurately aligned. That's my favourite word, isn't it? Aligned. And then of course you just assemble your box. An alternative method for getting the centre hub, or the disc to support the hub, is to make up a jig for your drill press. You've got a threaded rod into a bearing or bush in the base. Everything's centered up plumb, and then you can use a post to place a drill, rather a file on, so that you can very, very accurately turn down the bit of, say, custom wood, for instance, or compressed sheet, to make your discs. And you can sneak up on the height of, the diameter of the hole bit by bit, test it, file it, put it back in. This is a jig for making toys and toy wheels, but can be used for whatever purpose you want, if you want to make a round disc. And this is a very, very simple jig that can be just, popped in the back of your drill and used as and when you want, if you want. And you can, this is what I call my vertical lathe. This is the poor man's lathe. And if you want to put a little angle on it, well, again, you can just tilt your file slightly, fire up the drill, makes it more of a wee bit of a taper, and push it in. So those two very, very simple ways to make the carriage upon which the hub's supported, well, it's not hard to do, is it? And this is why when we're saying, even though this may be, it looks a little bit involved, it was and is intended for other usages. So why not make use of it for our hub process? Okay, that'll be it. I'm going to wander off and have a cup of tea, and I'll let you have whatever you like. Rightio, that's it. See you later. Bye.